It's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome this evening to the regular meeting of the board for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. I would like to now call the meeting to order. And just prior to us standing up for the acknowledgement and national anthem, I just remind you to turn off your cameras until that is completed. Thanks. And if we could stand up for the acknowledgement and the national anthem.
We would like to acknowledge
that we are here today
on the traditional territory
of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation.
Nous tenons à reconnaître que
nous sommes sur le territoire traditionnel
des Mississaugas de la Première Nation de Credit.
Oh, Canada.
Thank you. And now to the approval of the agenda. I believe there's the only amendment to the agenda is an updated document for item 8.1. And with that updated document, I will approve the amended agenda. Moving on to special presentations. There are no special presentations this evening. I have no conflicts of interest to declare. And on to item 3.1, the regular meeting of the board, February 23rd, 2021. I have read and approved the minutes of the regular meeting of the board for February 23rd, 2021. Item number 4, there are no notices of motion or petitions this evening. And that takes us to item number 5, retirements. I would like to thank the following individuals for their service to the Peel District School Board and wish them every success in their future endeavors. Elliot Applebaum, Maureen Berry, Diane Beersford, Rosemary Boating, Klaus Bread-Schneider, Sue Campbell, Pam Clark, Mary Cook, Jim Davies, Susan Eves, Vicky Fisher, Gertruda Galkowska, Pauline Geiger, Joanne Gideon, Christine Hancock, Ruth Kahn, Shelley Kohler, Kathy Matanovich, Nancy Morrison, Tracy Murray, Gordon Patterson, Vijaya Pedinti, Nancy Prouse, Gail Russell, Linda Shaw, Kelly Smith, Gertha Thakur, Anne Zeng, Dale Ward, Karen Warner, and Derek Watt. Again, congratulations and thank you for your many years of service to the board. There are no delegations this evening for item 6 and item 7. There is no new business for the agenda. On to item number 8, and just prior to passing it over to the director, let me just remind you that the trustees are also attending tonight, as they have all the other evenings, and they've been provided the opportunity to ask questions. They will place them in the chat, and I will then ask the question and also identify who it is that's asking the question. Director Russell Rollins, 8.1, please.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I will offer a few opening remarks and then speak specifically to a number of updates, followed by brief comments associated with the report attached under the Director's update this evening. The month of March has included some significant milestones for the Peel District School Board. We opened this month celebrating International Women's Day on March the 8th and took the time to celebrate, support, and empower members of our Peel Board community who identify as women and strengthen our communities, our country, and our world. Last week, people around the world took a moment to reflect on the one-year mark of the day the World Health Organization officially declared a global pandemic in 2020. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize PDSB's outstanding staff. Throughout the health pandemic, staff have been adaptable and solutions-focused when they heard that greater vigilance was required. During each phase of the pandemic, there have been course corrections which have allowed us to respond to the changing circumstances while staying focused on student learning and well-being. It's one thing to have great operating procedures, but their true value rests in the implementation of those procedures by our staff, our students, and our community. It is with confidence that I share that our staff have done their best to follow the health guidance each and every day as part of their investment in keeping students, families, and each other safe. On behalf of the senior leadership team, trustees, Supervisor Rodriguez, students, and families, I want to say thank you to the Peel District School Board staff for their extraordinary effort during the health pandemic and maintaining a focus on student learning. In March, we also reached the one-year milestone since the Minister of Education issued the first review of our system and provided directives for our way forward. I am proud to be serving alongside the PDSB community as we take the numerous lessons we are learning from this year and apply them as we invest in making the Peel District School Board a more equitable, engaging, and safe working and learning environment for students and for staff. So with that said, tonight my director's update will focus specifically on the prioritization of education workers in phase 2 of the vaccination rollout. I'll speak a little bit about stepping into spring, our student learning and engagement opportunities, Wellness Wednesday, and our revised principal and vice principal promotion processes. Following that, I will address the report. We've been pleased to hear that education workers are part of the Government of Ontario's phase 2 vaccination rollout, and we are prepared to work with Peel Public Health to ensure staff working in schools are prioritized in this process. As more information is available, we will be sure to share it with our school communities. To support student and staff wellness during this unprecedented year, the student learning team invited educators and students to step into spring through the exploration of new resources, learning activity, and virtual excursions during the weeks of March 15th through April 9th. As part of this initiative, live virtual experiences have been offered to classes. These sessions have included learning sessions with author Jenny Craft, athlete, motivational speaker and coach Bilquist Abdul Kadar, visits to the Sugar Bush at Peel District School Board's outdoor education centers, and various curricular adventures in Minecraft led by the Empowering Modern Learners team. To date, over 7,500 Peel District School Board students and educators have engaged in this learning. Thank you very much to the student learning team for providing this rich array of resources and experiences. We recognize that students, families, and staff continue to face new and difficult challenges in maintaining all aspects of their well-being over the course of the pandemic. Peel staff are pleased to offer Wellness Wednesday sessions for virtual and in-person classrooms. Each Wednesday in March and April, classrooms and staff are invited to a 30-minute virtual session where classes will take a wellness break and focus on the 4 pillars of well-being: physical, cognitive, social, and emotional. Staff sessions are planned for Thursdays to go well beyond the Wellness Wednesdays. It's important for us to remember that school leadership has the greatest impact on the learning outcomes of students, second only to teachers, and that's stated in research. We know from both parents and students that they recognize the significant role that principals and vice principals play in creating a culture within their school of learning, relationships, and respect for human rights. With our revised promotion processes, we are seeking leaders who understand that it requires much more than good intentions and hard work to uproot discrimination in classrooms, schools, and across the system. And as director, I'm committed to working with leaders across this board to drive this transformation. Interested school leaders can find more information on our internet site. And now I would like to turn to the 1-year milestone since the first ministry review of the Peel District School Board. Last March, the ministry issued a report containing a series of 27 directives with over 54 actions intended to establish strong accountability measures and responsibilities, restore good governance, and dismantle systemic inequities at all levels of the organization, with a specific focus on eradicating anti-Black racism throughout the Peel District School Board. The directives are not a checklist, and as system leaders, we have focused on on ensuring that they are not viewed that way and they are not implemented in that manner. In fact, they are a roadmap for significant change. This transformation is wide-ranging and includes the directives, and we're beginning to work on each of the areas so that a student's experience changes and that the experiences of our families and staff change. While the Peel District School Board is on the right track, there is a long journey ahead to truly transform the board by dismantling anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and multiple forms of oppression. I'd like to share just a few highlights of our progress to date. Several of the governance initiatives have been completed through the leadership of Supervisor Rodriguez, Lori Barnes, Special Governance Advisor, and General Counsel Giselle Basanta. Directive number 21 includes a full review of suspensions and expulsions and our disciplinary practices so that students who identify as Indigenous, African, Black, and Caribbean, Latinx, and boys are treated fairly and not overrepresented in our suspension and expulsion data. We've begun Directive 15 by initiating a senior team, as well as managers, vice principals, and principal professional learning in anti-Black racism. However, we're moving beyond learning. Learning, action, and accountability need to inform our leadership practices. Under Directive number 24, the Employment Systems Review is in its early stages, and we are eagerly awaiting the outcome so that it can provide us with the valuable guidance and direction we need in improving our hiring, training, and retention practices. In my 8 months as director, I can confidently state that the directives are the foundation for the change, but it is apparent that there is more we must do to deliver on the promise of public education to the students of this amazing region. There are complex issues laid out in the 2 ministry reports that continue to plague our system today. I view this as an opportunity to engage with all of you listening and all of you here on this meeting this evening in creating a more equitable school system. So what are we going to do as we move forward? I would like to highlight 2 steps that we're taking that go beyond the ministry reviews. Firstly, we have issued a staff requirement on discriminatory slurs and statements in all of our learning environments. You know, as a public school board serving the diverse community of the Peel region, that we're committed to fulfilling both our legal and professional, as well as our moral duty to ensure the well-being and safety of all of our students and staff, and to protect our community members from the harmful use and/or condemnation of any hate speech or discriminatory slurs in our learning and working environments. That's why we've put into place a new staff requirement regarding reporting discriminatory slurs and statements in our learning environments. This requirement was put into effect immediately after it was issued. Secondly, there is a review of our complaint processes to ensure that both staff and students are aware of the avenues available to them to ensure that their concerns are heard. The process is used to listen and respond to those concerns. We must ensure that they uphold each and every individual's human rights and that they are procedurally fair. It is the only way in which we can begin to rebuild trust with our community members. And lastly, I want to express my personal appreciation and admiration to the PDSB staff, unions and association members, community members, academics, and critical friends for their tenacious leadership and direct contribution to the progress that is documented in the report attached to our agenda this evening. They have demonstrated leadership often in the face of resistance. I invite you to review the 1-year community progress update, which is available on the PDSB website. I will now introduce the Student Equity Committee recruitment video. And I would like to turn it over to 3 school leaders who have assisted in the development of this particular committee for students. Ahmed Mahotra, Raquel Walker, and Omari Roden. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think I'm doing okay. Am I heard? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can.
It looks like my camera's frozen. Well, and these are the wonders of technology. But I hope I look okay in my frozen state. So good evening, everyone. My name is Omari Roden. Pleasure to be here with everyone this evening. And it's been an honor working with Raquel and Ahmed on this project, along with Colleen under her leadership. The ministry review, though eye-opening for some, was not a surprise to others. There's a long-standing history of systemic racism and various forms of oppression, not only in the PDSB, but in schools across the country. For far too many students and families, the legacy of colonialism and white supremacy have rendered their educational experiences ineffective and in many cases traumatic. The ministry review has validated these experiences, and the 27 directives are pointing us towards necessary system transformation. Not only is the dismantling of anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and all forms of oppression mandated, it is necessary. It is the right thing to do, and it is long overdue. Raquel?
Thank you, Omari. As part of the commitment to fulfill the Ministry of Education's review, Directive 11, the formation of a Student Equity Committee is a requirement. The purpose of the committee is to ensure that a broad cross-section of student voice informs the strategies to eliminate anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and other forms of discrimination in schools, and to improve student learning and engagement. What you are about to see is the promotional video that will go out to the system tomorrow as an invitation to students in grades 7 to 11 to apply to be part of the Student Equity Committee. The hope is that the committee will be formed by early April, and they will have their first meeting with Director Rollins shortly thereafter. Ahmed?
Thank you, Raquel. The promotional video will go out to all PDSB staff, be posted to the PDSB website and social media sites, and go out to our employee resource groups and community partners. Our hope is to ensure that all students have a chance to see this video and consider applying to be part of the committee. You too can encourage youth you know in grades 7 through 11 to apply. We would like to thank the student trustees, Pragyan Malhotra and Shivoam Nar, for their insights and leadership in putting this video together. It was our pleasure to collaborate with them. We would also like to thank the students involved in making the video and for the time they took out to create this promotional video. Now let's have a look at their great work. Over to you, Mark.
Hello, Peel students. Do you want to make a change in education and have your voice heard? The Peel Board is putting together a student equity committee, and we need passionate and driven individuals to help make a change.
Anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism have caused harm to far too many students in Peel. It is time to disrupt all of the oppressive colonial structures schools have been built around, and we need diverse voices to make this happen.
The Ministry of Education has found out that systematic racism is a problem within our board. The purpose of this Student Equity Committee is to address this ongoing issue and center the voices and lived experience of students.
There are 27 directives that our board needs to resolve, and these directives are geared towards eliminating these problems within our education system. Our committee will focus on Directive 11.
This directive helps us understand the transformation that is needed. We need to prioritize student voices in curriculum changes,
Disciplinary policies and procedures, dress codes, and extracurricular activities.
Further example of topics will include LGBTQ+, Indigenous rights, use of the N-word, unfair treatment, and much more.
For example, do you know Shakespeare is not mandatory to learn in our curriculum? This is your opportunity to have a say in what you learn.
We need diverse perspectives to guide the decisions that will be made to fulfill this directive. That's why we need representation from throughout the Peel region, including students from different cultural backgrounds, races, sexual orientations, physical abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and different identities.
These meaningful conversations can help better the lives of students in Peel. This is why we need your voice to represent students and take in important discussions.
To apply, take a look at the application process and be sure to check out Peel's Instagram and Twitter for more information. We look forward to reviewing your application.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. That concludes the director's update.
Great. Thanks so much, Director Russell Rollins. Thank you to administrators Raquel, Amari, and Amit for the work that you've put in with the students, and certainly our student trustees as well in terms of the work that is before us on the committee. We look forward to all of that work from the Student Equity Committee. So thanks for that. Director Russell Rollins, thanks for your update. Specifically, thank you for the format of the presentation of the one-year piece. The material and the detail contained therein are extremely well done and certainly useful for providing a sense of where we are at a glance relative to directives. Thanks again to all. Well done. Moving on to item 8.2. COVID-19 school planning update number 7, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I would ask System Superintendent Claudine Scucato to provide this update.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez and Director Russell Rollins. As a part of our ongoing commitment to staff, students, and community safety, we continually update our enhanced safety measures and our operational procedures based on direction and guidance from Peel Public Health. Often, this is based on local Peel contexts in relation to case counts, combined with new learning as to how exposures and transmissions occur. All of the Peel Public Health recommendations that we operationalize are meant to increase the levels of safety for our students, staff, and our greater community. I first would like to touch base on staff eating practices. Given the increasing identification of variants of concern that are more contagious and trends in how school outbreaks transmissions are occurring, the following protocols have been shared with school staff. That they should only unmask while eating lunch and then immediately put their masks back on. They should not congregate while eating. Unused classrooms are available to be used when no one else is present, or if weather permits, outdoor eating. They may open windows in lunchrooms as tolerated and create a schedule so only one person isn't eating in any space at one time. There are no eating with students present in the classroom, and that drinking water is permitted with students present but without entirely removing masks. There is not, nor has there been, a PDSB or Peel Public Health Directive or recommendation for staff to eat in their vehicles shared with staff. I understand that there has been some social media chatter on this, and I just wanted to ensure clarity on this matter. Moving to asymptomatic student and community testing using PDSB school locations. Guided by the Ministry of Education and in partnership with Peel Public Health, Ontario Health and Life Labs, the Peel District School Board participate weekly in asymptomatic targeted testing. This serves at least 5% of our elementary and secondary schools each week. School locations are selected with the support from Peel Public Health and Ontario Health regions. In each superintendency, we have prioritized schools in areas of high transmission, high case numbers, and schools where access to current testing programs may be challenging. As well, we took into consideration physical plants and accessibility for the community. Thus far, we have had 15 secondary sites that are up for staff and students only. We have also had 16 elementary sites, which is used as a community site for all students, staff, and community within that family of schools. Through Life Labs, they have administered over 2,150 cases, tests, with a percentage rate of less than 1%. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Scoccato. Just a couple of questions. I'm going to first start with a question from Trustee Crocker, who was part of an email chain this morning. There's a slight preamble, if you could just bear with me and listen to that, and then there's a question at the end of that, and perhaps you or Director Russell Rollins may be able to answer that. So Trustee Crocker was contacted earlier today by teachers who were upset about remarks made by Dr. Lowe on Metro Morning to the effect that teachers are to blame for outbreaks in their schools. Dr. Lowe was quick to respond to his concerns, saying that Dr. Lowe's statement was not that this is the only reason that school outbreaks are occurring, but that we have indeed seen transmission from staff to staff in lunchrooms and break rooms. And that's what led to the advice that was provided that teachers eat on their own as much as possible. Dr. Lowe then went on to say that Dr. Howe can help clarify this recommendation in greater detail. And we're grateful, of course, for the continued work of all teachers to adhere to precautions and keep themselves and the learning environment safe during this very difficult time. In a separate email, he wrote, to be clear, and this is Dr. Lowe again, to be clear, my remarks were in speaking to data and were not intended to cast blame or aspersions. As I stated in my reply, we understand the very difficult time that our teachers have navigated and the work that they have done in keeping our school environment as safe as possible during this continuing emergency. Dr. Howe followed up saying that she would also like to echo Dr. Lowe's comment that we absolutely support and are thankful for the critical work that teachers are doing. While schools have put out significant precautions in place, we have had instances of transmission related to removal of masks and eating or drinking in closed spaces. And since the return to in-person school in January 2021, there have been at least 9 school staff who likely acquired COVID-19 in this way. Due to these findings, we have made recommendations for staff to eat alone as much as possible and to drink at least 2 meters apart from students in class. We have issued these recommendations in addition to mandatory eye protection to strengthen measures for staff safety. The question that Trustee Crocker has is, does the board acknowledge and affirm that it views our frontline school workers as partners in the fight against COVID-19?
Thank you. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will answer that question. As I stated in my opening remarks, the Peel District School Board has been well served by our staff. From the moment they returned in September, they were committed to understanding our operating procedures, which were, I think, among the most detailed in the province. They have shown resilience and commitment to following those operating procedures. And as new guidance has been issued, our staff have adapted to follow those new protocols, sometimes under challenging circumstances. So on behalf of the senior team, students and families, I want to reiterate and affirm that our staff are partners and have shown tremendous professionalism throughout the pandemic in serving our students and in assisting in keeping our schools open for learning and safe places to learn and work. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins. And then again, just for clarity, there has been no requirement, nor ever was there a requirement for teachers to be eating in their cars. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Great. Thanks so much. One further question, just for clarity again. Could you please clarify as to how parents are kept informed about outbreaks in their child's school?
Yes, absolutely. So our school community is the first to know when we have an outbreak. We make sure that they're informed first, and that's done through sending messages to the school. We often will do that as quickly as we know. If they're not available in that way, then we also continually on a daily basis update our school website. So it's available there for parents in the greater community.
Great, thanks. Thanks for all of your work again, Superintendent Sciccato and Director Russell Rollins. We will continue to work with you as all of this, is ever changing in terms of the day-to-day sort of practices that continue to occur. So thank you again. Thanks for your report and thanks for all the work.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 8.3, Ministry Review Directives, 8.3A, Directive 16, Anti-Racism Policy, Progress Report number 2, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'll offer a few opening remarks and then turn it over to Assistant Director Rohan Thompson to speak directly to the report this evening. This report is the second update, I believe, on the development of the anti-racism policy. And the report is significant in that it describes the feedback received from various stakeholders. I must confess that the feedback received through the thought exchange was surprising to me. The survey revealed anti-Black racism is still evident in at least some of our schools and parts of our PDSB community, and it affirms many of the themes outlined in the ministry review. Ironically, it actually emphasizes the need for an anti-racism policy that confirms our collective commitment to eradicating anti-Black racism and other forms of discrimination and our accountabilities for doing so. So with that said, I will ask Assistant Director Thompson to speak to the report.
Thank you for that, Director Russell Rollins. Hi, everybody. My name is Rohan Thompson, Assistant Director, Equity and Community Relationships with PDSB, and I'm presenting with the team of Pauline Graywall, LaShawn Murray, and Vanessa Bonsu. We were all co-authors or joint authors on this report. So I hope everybody's had a chance to review the report. But in short, the purpose of the report is to provide a progress update in regards to Directive number 16. And Directive 16 states that Peel District School Board is to develop an anti-racism policy in consultation, with broad consultation with the community and support from the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And so in our process, we've had a preliminary consultation in December of 2020 where PDSB used Thought Exchange platform as an initial method to engage staff, families, and community members in the development of its anti-racism policy. The Thought Exchange conversations were live for 1 week, and participants were asked to respond to 2 questions as well to rate the responses of the other participants. It is important to note that the results presented in the Thought Exchange report that you have are the voices of the survey participants and not that of the board. However, there are many key learnings in the feedback that we received. There were a number of themes that emerged from the Thought Exchange. Some of the themes, and they won't be unfamiliar to you because they're very familiar to us through the ministry review, is around accountability, safe reporting, safe spaces, curriculum, professional development, white fragility, white privilege, and white supremacy, to name a few. Along with the preliminary Thought Exchange consultation, we are also committed to hearing the voices of our internal stakeholders. So with that in mind, we're in the process of conducting a robust internal stakeholder consultation. The consultation will run from March into April of this year. In total, we will have over 20 internal focus groups conversations. In addition, an electronic survey of the focus group questions will be made available to our internal stakeholders. All of the unions, federations, employee resource groups have all been given the opportunity to participate as internal stakeholders with the consultation. And also a special note is that Dr. Akwatu Kente is supporting the PDSB in the entire process in the development of the anti-racism policy, and we're lucky to have him with us. In addition to the internal consultation, there's the need and requirement, and it is necessary to have a robust external stakeholder consultation. I think it's important to, co-construction is the key to the success of the anti-racism policy. So with that in mind, we have established a community and staff-based steering committee, and the steering committee will help to co-construct the process for the external consultation as well to provide input into the draft policy, operating procedure, and any supplemental reports that will come as a result. The steering committee had its first meeting in February of this year, and they will be meeting again twice in March of this year. So for next steps, we will continue to work with the steering committee to develop the comprehensive external community consultation. This will change the anticipated deadline of when the draft policy will be completed and presented to the Board of Trustees. We have also engaged with the Ontario Human Rights Commission as per the ministry directive, and we are in the process of determining what the OHRC support will look like. Lastly, before I wrap up, it's important to note that Turner Consulting will also be monitoring and following the internal and external engagement process of the anti-racism policy, and taking the learning to help support the development of PDSB's community engagement framework, which is a component of Ministry Directive number 10. On that note, I will close, and if there are any questions at that point, myself and the team will attempt to answer those questions.
Thank you, Assistant Director Thompson, for that. Thank you for the report. I found the Thought Exchange quite informative, and like the next steps, I just have 2 very short questions, if you will.
Yes.
The first one pertains to: will both the internal and external stakeholder consultations occur virtually, given the situation that we currently find ourselves in?
Thank you for the question. Short answer, yes, unless things change significantly. The plan is to conduct the consultations virtually.
Thank you. And do you have a sense of the number of stakeholders you anticipate having being involved? I just mean sort of like a baseline. Do you have a sense of, what that number might be to give you sufficient input into what needs to occur?
Internally, we will have had well over 100 people participate, and externally, it's going to be through the thought exchange. We've had close to somewhere around 1,000 folks participate, and to the more fulsome external consultation, it would be difficult to give you a number on that because we're still in the process of developing that with community.
Great, thank you so much for that. Question from Trustee McDonald about the primary questions. Any thoughts about the role of the Board of Trustees?
Great question. That has been a question that has been posed, and as a group, we're still continuing to discuss. But okay. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
And she's directing you more specifically the 6 questions that you had listed as part of the internal conversation that you were going to have. So, okay. Wondering if that could also be part of the trustee conversation.
Yeah, we could definitely look at that. Yes.
Great. Thanks again. Thank you so much for all of your work, for the team's work, and really appreciate that. Have a good evening, and I'm in receipt of the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 8.3B, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I will ask Executive Superintendent Liz Cook to speak to this report.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Before you this evening for receipt is an update on Directive 17, Reform of Guidance Systems and Programs, and it's update number 1. The guidance review is a critical next step as we work towards eliminating the disparities and disproportionate outcomes in student achievement and experience for students who identify as Black, African, Caribbean, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. As evidenced in the ministry review of the Peel District School Board through the narratives of students and families, the guidance counselor role has a significant influence on the programs and pathways of our students. Given the significant influence of guidance counselors on student pathways, the committee will interrogate the relationship between counselors and students who have been historically underserved. A committee has been established and includes representation from central staff, school staff, our unions and our associations, and from student and parent advisory groups. Professional learning is currently being developed by staff from Student Learning, and we are being supported through the leadership of Natasha Henry. And this professional learning will be grounded in our commitment to equity, anti-racism, anti-oppression, with a focus on dismantling anti-Black racism. For the 2020 school year, there is an expectation that principals will give preference to applicants who identify as Black, African, or Caribbean, and in particular, Black, African, and Caribbean male applying to guidance positions. Additionally, principals have been also asked to give consideration to other racialized staff, given the importance that we know of in representation, and they are to do so in reflecting on the composition of their school makeup. The review of the guidance system is part of an overall review of all pathways and programs that is necessary as we work to disrupt and dismantle systematic inequities and disproportionality that impact students who identify as Black, African, Caribbean, First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. Thank you, and we are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Cook, for that. I only have one question on the report, and if you could just briefly sort of elaborate for me on goal number 5.
So I'm going to ask Associate Director Graywall to support with this response, please.
Great, thank you. So through you, Supervisor. So when we're looking at change in teacher pedagogy and teacher practice, we're looking at a formal inquiry, critical practitioner inquiry model that the team has put together. to support the change. We know when we're looking at changing structures that are racist, we need to also look at changing our own understanding of what it means to be anti-racist. So we'll be working through a professional learning process with them so that the guidance counselors who are engaged in the learning will start to look at their own biases, their own stereotypes, perhaps their own lived experiences, their social locations, as they engage in supporting students through it from a guidance perspective.
Thanks, Sadie Grewal. Question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. Is there any, what messaging is going out to the system so that people understand that the candidates hired are qualified and competent?
The messaging didn't indicate that, but all of our staff who we hire are qualified and competent, and we would be looking for this additional piece for of identity to support our students who we're serving with identities. So these are qualified, competent staff, and that's what we look for in all roles that we hire for.
Thank you. And follow up. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Supervisor Rodriguez, if I could just add. That is a question that has come up frequently as we work to remove barriers that have prevented racialized staff from applying and being successful in a variety of positions in the board. I think we need to openly question when questions come forward that assert that this premise that our hiring practices are not in fact going to yield us with staff who have the competencies required to fulfill job requirements and to achieve the goals that we have set. And so I just want to say publicly that our staff are competent and that we do need to question each and every time questions like this that come up. We need to ask whether or not they are rooted in racist beliefs and or biases that have contributed to the disproportionate number of staff who find it difficult to achieve these positions, who have found it difficult to achieve these positions historically.
Thank you for that, Director. A follow-up question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. Will there be an opportunity for students to have a mechanism to get help if they feel they're not being served adequately?
I'll leave that to you, Associate Director Graywell.
Great, thank you. So through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, obviously, as always, if students feel they're not getting the support that they require, they would reach out to their administrator, their principal, or their vice principal to be able to seek more support through their families as well, who also can connect with the school and or the school superintendent.
Great. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for the report. Thank you, Superintendent Cook, Associate Director Grewal, and Director Russell Rollins. I'm in receipt of the report in 8.3. Moving on, 8.3B, I should say. Moving on to 8.4, interim policy expungement of suspension and expulsion records for students in kindergarten to grade 3. Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I am pleased to ask General Counsel Giselle Basanta, who assisted staff in the development of this policy, to speak to it this evening.
Thank you, Madam Director, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. I'm pleased to present the board with this policy, this interim policy, to implement the decision of the board that was taken on December the 8th, 2020, to expunge the discipline records of students who received that discipline while they were in kindergarten to grade 3. We present this policy to the board in furtherance and acknowledgement of addressing behavior outlined in Section 3061 of the Education Act by young students with positive behavior supports such as restorative practices rather than discipline, to rebuild trust with our communities and acknowledge the disproportionate effect of student discipline on Black, African, Caribbean, and Indigenous students, and to acknowledge the research that even one suspension at an early age can negatively impact student success. The policy mandates the permanent expungement of these records from both the paper and the electronic files, with very few exceptions as set out in the law and in the ministry's policies. Of our last few points, we propose an interim policy, as we did not have time to go out for the consultation. So this policy will be included in the board's policy review framework as soon as it is in place. We also included a compliance mechanism and an annual obligation going forward. The procedures are currently being finalized, and information on implementation will be forthcoming to staff. I would like to sincerely thank our team, Assistant Director Shirley Ann Teal, Assistant Director Lynn Strangway, and Gina Mathai from our Learning Technology Support Services, who worked on the policy with me. And a special shout out to Sony Gill, Superintendent Sony Gill, and Vice Principal Fiona Lloyd-Henry, who consulted with us in conjunction with their work on Directive 21, the review of the student discipline policy. I offer this to the board for approval. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, General Counsel Basanta, for that. Thank you for the clarity of this particular policy as well and the succinctness of it. The first question is from Trustee Dakrub. She acknowledges the very crucial work that this is and thanks you for your efforts as well. Is there a particular length of time that we keep suspension records for any grade, or are they kept throughout the time a student is in school? And is there any consideration for expunging suspensions past grade 3, potentially for all students, or perhaps creating a time framework, for example, a year, that we would keep the records? And she suggests that she has a difficult time understanding the purpose of holding on to suspension records in the long term. It seems like an oppressive practice that we could perhaps do away with.
Well, thank you for the question, Trustee. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act does mandate a standard of retaining personal information for a period of 1 year, but 1 year after the board is finished using it. So if there is progressive discipline, then that 1 year could be extended. The second comment I would make is that the ministry policy does mandate that that discipline for violent incidents, so violent incidents, which is behavior set out in 310 of the Education Act. Those are the ones where you must suspend and consider expulsion. So the more serious behaviors, those have to stay on for at least a 1 year period. Finally, what I'll say is that Section 9 of the Ontario Student Record Guideline, which has been in place for a very long time, almost 22 years, does have a provision in it, Section 9, that allows parents to make a request to the board, to the principal, in fact, to remove any record in the OSR that is not conducive to the education of the student. The principal's decision is appealable to the superintendent, and that has always been there.
Thank you.
Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, General Counsel Basanta. I would reference the December 8th report, board report, in which the expungement of student suspensions kindergarten to grade 3 was put forward to the board for consideration. Within that report, we made a commitment to reviewing the potential of, to looking into the potential of removing additional suspension records, but we wanted to do some background work to look at the implications of doing that, so the board can look forward to a report once that review has been completed.
Thanks, Director Russell Rollins. Follow-up question from Trustee Dakrub. Could we potentially expunge suspension records for students who have not had any repeated occurrences within 1 year?
I would reiterate the director's comments to that, and also the fact that this is an interim policy. It will be out for consultation and review, and these are the kinds of things we want to hear and consider. So when we make this a permanent policy, that we will go further than the board's commitment on December 8th.
Thank you. A question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. If you look at page 3 of the report under policy number 2, will the board reach out to parents to get consent, bearing in mind some parents do not know about this policy? And what's the threshold for the bullet points for number 4? Example, what if someone is falsely accused? What is the threshold for hate/bias?
Hate/bias. Okay, let's take the first one first. This is about, remind me, Supervisor?
Yeah, for sure.
I can't see the chat.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So under policy number 2, will the board reach out to parents to get consent, bearing in mind some parents do not know about this policy?
Yeah, so we're working on some procedures right now that will notify parents whose students fall into these categories, to whom this interim policy applies. And if the record is on there for less than 1 year, there will be a form consent, a consent form that we can send to parents and get that signed and get the record off the file. So yes, so that's part of the procedures.
Great, thank you. Follow up from, sorry, go ahead, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. If I perhaps can infer the intent behind the question, it is our intent to expunge the records of students, the previous suspension records of students in kindergarten to grade 3 of all students. I haven't yet met a parent who would object to that, and we will not let the fact that some parents may not return a form, in fact, deter us from doing that. We think that it's an important part of supporting a student's educational success. If there is, of course, a parent who wishes for a record to stay, we would certainly agree to that, but we're going to work on a positive presumption that all of our parents would like their child's suspension records expunged kindergarten to grade 3, and that's the way in which we will be moving forward. So perhaps I've inferred the intent behind the question.
Great, thank you for that. And just to follow up from Trustee Catherine McDonald, could you elaborate on how these records will be monitored and if there is a plan to examine individual expulsion patterns? So she's going a little beyond in terms of asking, not just in terms of the policy itself, and then for violent incidents, are these investigated to find out what the triggers were? And there are cases where some students, when moved to a different site, have little or no violent occurrences. So in terms of not continuing on along those lines, will there be some understanding of expungement of those suspensions and expulsions?
Well, how these records will be monitored is there a plan to examine individual expulsion patterns? Well, we certainly could look at that as part of our review. It's not in the procedures right now. The goal is to just get those records off the file and have a system in place where we do that annually. But again, for review, these are excellent questions that should be considered seriously. For the violent incidents, are these investigated? Yes, they must be investigated per the 310 section 310(1) of the Education Act. There must be an investigation report, and that's part of the ministry's new regulation. Is that so? The suspensions are ceased, and only the 310 activities will be subject to discipline for early years, but there must be an investigation first.
Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much. We will be monitoring all of our data sets, and certainly I know on behalf of the associate directors that we have great interest in the expulsion data, and so it's through the associate directors working closely with superintendents of education that we will be monitoring expulsions. And with regards to ensuring that serious incidences are investigated appropriately, we know we have work to do in that regard, and we will continue to invest in ensuring that school-based staff and our superintendents of education are able to conduct fair investigations to inform whatever decisions need to be made.
Thanks, Director Russell Rollins. Thank you, General Counsel Basanta, and thanks, Executive Superintendent Cook, for all of your work on this. It's critical work and certainly some important pieces as we move forward. And we recognize it's an interim policy, but we certainly happy about the succinctness and the clarity of it, and we look forward to the final draft. Thanks so much. And with that, I approve the policy.
Thank you.
Moving on to 8.5, the Elementary French Immersion Review Status Update, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I will ask Executive Superintendent Liz Cook to speak to this report, please.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Before you this evening for receipt is the Elementary French Immersion Review Update. The purpose of this report is to provide a status update on the Elementary French Immersion Review. The review, just as a reminder, is flowing from a prior review addressing the need to put some caps on classes, and that was in response to challenges being faced around the recruitment of qualified French teachers. We did have to pause the review as a result of the impact of COVID-19, and September 2020 would have seen the board approving the resumption of the French Immersion Review beginning January 2021. I'll now turn it over to Superintendent De Silva, who is co-chairing the committee with Principal Della Latai-Herdsman, to share with you the work of the review committee to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Cook. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Currently, the French Immersion Review Committee has met on January 27th and February 25th of 2021 and has 4 additional meetings planned between March 2021 and June 2021. The committee is working to have a full board report prepared for October 2021. The intent is to have the recommendations established in the report ready for adoption for the 22-23 school year. The committee to date has established its terms of reference. I think you have that in Appendix 2, along with a list of committee members. During our February meeting and our scheduled meetings over the course of the next few months, we will have provincial and departmental leads from PDSB prepare and share relevant data to support our decisions on the scope of its mandate. Given the important work mandated through the ministry, the committee will also analyze the application and registration for French immersion and extended French programs, operating procedures CIS-15, and through an anti-racist and anti-oppressive lens. This may include looking at access to the programs and understanding of who is represented in these programs and who is not, and accessibility of French immersion programs to all students, regardless of their intersectional identity. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Superintendent De Silva and Executive Superintendent Cook. I found the report to be complete. Just want to clarify that one of the primary purposes of the review was to address the complex staffing needs. Is that correct? And have we got any farther along because of the difficulties that we experience in attracting French teachers?
Go ahead, Superintendent De Silva. You can respond to that with your HR work lately.
For sure. So thank you, Superintendent Cook, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Currently, we are still experiencing challenges, to be quite honest, and really in the way of LTO, French immersion experienced teachers. And so we need the review to take a hard look at what we currently have in place and what we're going to try to put in place moving forward to kind of ameliorate the situation. Now, I will say we have had in our first meeting a presentation from OPSPA, previous principal David Jack, as well as our previous associate director Judith Nyman, discuss on the issue. And this is not just a PDSB issue. They have 60 representatives in a pilot project that would share that this is a province-wide concern. So we are still dealing with a shortage for sure.
Right. Thanks so much. And again, thank you for the report. I'm in receipt of the report. Thanks, Superintendent De Silva, and thanks, Executive Superintendent Cook. Appreciate it. Sorry, Director Russell Rollins, while they're still around, I just had a question come in from Trustee Cameron. Might one of the considerations be that the board looks at raising the starting grade for French immersion?
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. I would ask Associate Director Graywall to respond.
Thank you. So through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, yes, all of that is under consideration, especially when we're looking at the availability of qualified French immersion teachers. So that's on the table as well.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. Moving on to item 8.6, strategy for African, Black, and Caribbean student success. Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. The strategy for African, Black, and Caribbean student success is before you for consideration this evening. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Associate Director Graywall's leadership in the development of this report. The initiation of this strategy is a significant next step for the Peel District School Board in demonstrating its enduring commitment beyond the ministry directives to the educational success of African, Black, and Caribbean students, a partnership with their caregivers and community members, and a resolve to dismantle anti-Black racism until there are proportionate outcomes in our student achievement data and the narratives of Black identified staff, students, and families are positive. Furthermore, the strategy will evolve the directives focused on creating proportional outcomes into a cohesive and aligned plan that identifies specific actions to be undertaken, indicators of success, and a process for monitoring results. It's an opportunity for the Peel District School Board to slowly rebuild trust and relationships with Black families, students, and staff. Like many other districts in Ontario who have similar strategies focused on the success of African, Black, and Caribbean students, the Peel District School Board strategy will contribute to reculturing of the system and integrating equity and anti-racism into daily practices in schools and departments. In this way, the strategy situates the Peel District School Board among others who are committed to change and achieving racial equity, and furthermore affirms the long-standing advocacy of community and the seriousness of the ministry mandate, which is before us. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you again for a complete and thorough report. I really don't have any questions on this report except two comments. The first one is just a general comment, and the second one perhaps one for consideration. The first comment, I'm just assuming that you're doing what you are doing in this work is making the work intentional. And in my second comment, I'm assuming that the creation of such an office that you speak about is to support the work from a multifaceted point of view. And I think the notion of curriculum where one's incorporating the student narrative, culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, and then from a well-being point of view, just around what we spoke about a few minutes ago around discretionary suspension under the the code of conduct injurious to the moral tone, and just a broader understanding of diverse mental health needs. So if all of those things will be taken into consideration, I think that's a great piece that you have going in terms of the work here. So thank you for that. I believe this report is here for approval, and I approve the report. Thanks to both you, Director Russell Rollins, and Associate Director Grewal. Moving on to item 8.7, School Board Teacher Hiring Practices, PPM 165, status update. Director Russell Rollins.
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will ask Associate Director Jaspal Gill to speak to this report.
So, thank you, Director Russell Rollins, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Wanted to provide the board an update on PPM 165 requirements to have a teacher hiring policy in place by March 31st. An interim policy was approved by the board on December 8th last year. It is recommended that this interim policy remain in place until a revised policy is presented to the board at the April 26th meeting and it is approved. Just to provide some background, last year in October, the government revoked Regulation 274. And then in February this year, the ministry released the Policy and Program Memorandum, PPM 165, which provided direction to school boards in the development and implementation of teacher hiring policy. In regards to the board's policy development process, our HR staff, along with workplace equity staff, continue to receive input from all stakeholders, including unions, federations, and associations. Input is also being sought from communities that have been underserved and marginalized. In addition to that, the board has a focused recruitment committee that continues to carry out work associated with the hiring of African, Black, Caribbean, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit educators. And the learning from this committee will also provide input into the development of the new policy. Employee resource groups are also being consulted in the development of the policy. In regards to the next steps, we continue to consult on the development of this policy, and it will continue over the next few weeks. This policy will be centered around the board's commitment to equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. It will not only fulfill the ministry's requirement around PPM 165, but it will also signal the transformation that is necessary and documented in the ministry's review and direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director Gill, and had an opportunity to read the entire report as well, and recognizing that what's being requested here is that the current interim policy remain in place, and that in fact that there will be an updated policy forthcoming in April. So we thank you for that, and rather have it done right than simply done. So I think that appreciate that and thank you for that. And also appreciate the need for you to continue to consult on some of that work. Question from Trustee Soe. As the board is still working on hiring policy, is in the current teacher hiring process, were any changes implemented to ensure diversity for hiring?
Actually, to you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I'm going to ask Superintendent Jamie Robertson to respond to that question.
Great, thanks.
So through you, Supervisor, and thank you. If I understand the question correctly, I believe the question is, in our current hiring processes, is there a consideration for diversity in terms of how we're moving forward? The board is continuing to move forward with our initiative around focused recruitment for Black and Indigenous is a particular area that we're focusing on. And so that's an exciting movement. We're really excited about how, with the withdrawal of Regulation 274, the expansion of that going into the future. So the response would be yes, we are continuing in that regard.
Thanks, Superintendent Robertson. And thanks, Associate Director Gill. With that, I am approving the report and look forward to the updated policy forthcoming in April. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.8, the update on cybersecurity incident, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you. Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I would ask Associate Director Jaspal Gill to introduce this report.
Sure. So thank you, Director Russell Rollins, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Again, I wanted to provide the board an update regarding the January 26th cybersecurity incident. Upon the discovery of this incident, our learning technology team took immediate steps to isolate the incident to minimize its impact. There was some access to some corporate systems was affected. The teaching and learning tools used by students and staff were not affected by the attack. Peel Police and the cybersecurity team, provincial cybersecurity team, were notified of the incident. Working with the board's insurance provider, the board retained the services of an industry-leading cybersecurity forum to not only investigate the incident, but also to provide us the recommendations for improvement. So following a thorough investigation, it was determined that no information was compromised or shared as a result of this incident. So we are working extensively with the cybersecurity forum to ensure that we take all appropriate actions to mitigate the risks of an incident like this from happening again. We are also assessing the resources required to complete all of the recommendations and will be submitting a business case related to the resources required. So I'm going to now turn over to CIO Antoine Huron to highlight the changes that we are implementing following this incident.
Thank you, Associate Director Gill, and through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. As Associate Director Gill indicated, we have been working extensively with a third-party forensic investigation firm to assist us with this. And as we know, the importance and reliance on technology in the last year has been more than ever before. And with more people working online, cyber attacks on public sector organizations have substantially increased. Many public sector organizations, including school boards, have been subject to frequent cyber attacks. While no organization can ever eliminate the potential risk of a cyber attack, we are working extensively to ensure that we take all appropriate actions to mitigate the risks. We have made several changes that fall into the following categories: system upgrades and modernization, additions and enhancements to our cybersecurity features, focused training, review and updates to IT policies and procedures, and enhanced communications about new expected practices. PDSB is committed to keeping its IT infrastructure and data safe and secure. To this end, we have implemented a comprehensive strategy to ensure that all systems continue to be patched and up to date. We will also be reviewing and addressing legacy systems that present an elevated risk. Under the additions and enhancement to our cybersecurity features, we will continue to enhance cybersecurity protocols by further reviewing account privileges, implementing additional logging and auditing, reviewing password management methodologies, and broadening the scope of multi-factor authentication. We have already created and developed a comprehensive web-based training framework that includes information on phishing, viruses, malware, ransomware, social engineering, physical security, and protection of personal information. We will continue to review, update, and revise the cybersecurity training as new information become available. We will also continue to review and update the IT policies and procedures to align with current and emerging threats. As student safety is our primary concern, we have also launched a cyber safety and security breach protocol that will guide educators, administrators, and superintendents through a decision-making process when they encounter a cybersecurity incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Haroon, and thank you, Associate Director Gill. A few questions. One starting with Trustee Marchand has a couple questions. Firstly, and again, if some of the information, I know that this is a complex situation. I know there's also confidential information that sort of has undertones here. So if there's need that we need to go in committee at some point to deal with this, please take that into consideration as we sort of work through and try to understand some of the information that we're receiving. What company has been hired to do the internal investigation? Is that something that we can that you can let us know?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I will consult with legal counsel and we will provide that information if we are able to disclose it.
Okay. Secondly, what was the process or criteria for selecting them as well, if that information can also be taken into consideration? And finally, when can we expect a fulsome public report on the method of the attack, the systems compromised, and the total cost to the board of the damages and remediation?
Associate Director Gill, would you like to respond to that question?
Associate Director Gill, you're on mute.
Yeah, through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. We did, the board have received a draft report from the cybersecurity firm that we are working with, and we are reviewing that report at this point. And because the police investigation is ongoing, this is still ongoing at this time. So I think it's not appropriate for us to provide any further details into the incident and how that occurred. And then also because this is a security matter, so we may not be able to provide and talk about all the details of the improvements that we are making in a public session. So I think, but we'd be happy to share highlight some of the improvements that we are making at some point in committee.
Thank you. We recognize the sensitivity of the situation, and so perhaps if you could take those back and sort of consider how we might be able to glean some information that could be shared in a public forum might be helpful. Question from Trustee Kathy McDonald. There were a lot of rumors circulating, so I was wondering if you could, at this stage of the investigation, confirm that this was not an inside job, quote unquote.
So again, through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, again, based on the investigation that we have done through our the cybersecurity firm, that they have not indicated that this was an inside job. But as I mentioned, that the police continue to investigate, and we continue to work with the police on this matter. And once they have done their investigation, we will probably have additional information. But as far as we know the information we have as of today, we are not aware that if this was an inside job.
Great. Thank you, Associate Director Gill. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the ongoing work that's going on with this. And we look forward to further updates as the investigation unfolds. And certainly we'll speak more about it in terms of being able to be transparent with public as well as to what's transpiring. So thanks so much. Appreciate your work with it, and I am in receipt of the report. Moving on to item 8.9, the second quarterly financial reports as at February 28th, 2021. Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rodriguez. The report is before you this evening. You've seen similar reports in the past, and so we would welcome any questions that you have through our Comptroller Tanya Alateshi Charles and Associate Director Jaspal Gill.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Had an opportunity to go through it, and I do have a few questions, if that's okay. We can sort of just start on some of the pages. So first, the piece here is, I noticed that we have only incurred a small amount relative to school renewal and operational expenses related to capital. Looking at your very first sort of overview there, I'm assuming that there will be more incurred through the summer based on the pandemic, have these costs been reduced in any way, or do they continue to remain fairly stable and assigned in other areas?
So through you, Supervisor Rodriguez, I can provide the response to that. Actually, the way the renewal work works, most of that actual construction work does happen over the summer months. And during the throughout the year, we will continue to do the design work. We continue to go out and get the tenders so that everything is in place for us to continue to have that work done over the summer months. And that's why you're seeing a small percentage of the expenditure that are there. But most of the work will be done, expenditure will happen over the summer months.
Great, thanks, AD Gill. On page 3, under association memberships and other costs, whose association memberships does this line refer to?
Sorry, through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. In terms of the region, those would be the ones that would be at the school level. So, but this line actually, if you see, it says associate memberships and dues and other costs. So the predominant amount is other costs. And in this line, there would be a certain allocation for COVID type budget that are happening. And so the reason it is so low at the moment is because we did receive quite a number of priority and partnership funds, the transfer payment agreements that are not being used first. So these reports, page 1 to 26, actually do not include the COVID transfer pricing agreements that we've received. Those are actually on page 26. But there is, and so we're using those first, and then as we exhaust those funding, because those are very time bound. We will then be using certain funds that are within our operational budget. So the line on page 3 is actually predominantly in other costs that would be more targeted for COVID in the future, in the balance of this year.
Thank you for that. And generally, when we see that line, could you clarify for me, when we say association memberships under regional and school budgets, who do we normally kind of provide that for?
This page, page 3 is at the school level. So it would be our 260 schools. So this page and the staffing costs that are associated is the bulk of what's happening at the school level.
Thank you, Controller. On page 5, the association memberships and other costs, which you've just spoken to, have gone to support COVID and other expenses. Will this be required at a later date? Will the funds, I guess, my question is, will they also be required? So will we sort of be taking, as you've just mentioned, these association memberships, when we talk about other costs, will we be looking at that line item continually and seeing it kind of being represented as expenses going towards COVID? Is that the issue there?
Through you, Supervisor Rodriguez. No, actually, because the way our expenses are grouped, unfortunately, other cost is general bucket, and so therefore that is why it's labeled in that way. And we could potentially look at having the reports look differently. And so right now, yes, because COVID costs are varied, and we are required to track them for the ministry, we have put them in one area. But certainly as we get additional funding for COVID, and again, we've had some recent announcement in February from additional funding, we will look to allocate some of these costs to those transfer pricing agreements. So in certain areas where you will see spikes due to COVID expenses in these other costs, we will work to move those out as we get the transfer pricing agreement solidified.
Appreciate that. And I know that I'll see that probably in a line item later on, so I'm not overly concerned. Your funds that are assigned to staff development in certain areas have not been accessed to a great degree. So when you look at them sort of collectively over all of the dashboards that you've provided, is there a reason for this? I'm sure you might not know this, but perhaps somebody else might, in terms of if there's a reason. And I'm thinking specifically, my question relates to if folks are either too burdened during this time to access the PD, or is it because there's not really any sort of rich PD online?
I can start and perhaps other people can, but certainly a lot of the PD costs that you will see in all the various departments sometimes show a refocus of where staff are right now prioritizing their work in some of their more day-to-day managing with COVID, and also looking at slowly relooking at how PD is being provided. So in some areas, they are choosing either to defer it to later in the year or not to have it due to the business in their areas. And in some cases, some PD is actually because it does not now require things like potentially travel or meals is actually also coming out a little bit cheaper in certain areas, at least for the first half of the year.
Great, thanks. That satisfies. My final question is, were there any savings to be gained through transportation? I recognize that the buses are still required to do their regular runs and have fewer students in them. Were we able to consolidate many runs, and were there any savings to be gained there?
Through you, as Supervisor Rodriguez, actually, I can respond to that. In fact, yes, the staff did go through the process of consolidating some other runs, but because of the limitation of the number of students who can be on these buses, and because of that, we continue to run, in fact, more runs as compared to our normal operations. So because of that, there will not be, in fact, any savings. In fact, the expenditure we will see this year will exceed our normal operations, and in fact, they will exceed the funds that we have received, additional funds we have received from the ministry. So we will most likely tap into our reserves for transportation.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you again for the way that you've presented the quarter, and certainly the dashboards are wonderful in terms of being able to see the snapshot in time and gives us a sense of what's to come. So thanks, Controller Alashe Charles. Sorry for that. I kind of messed up that. And Associate Director Gill. Thank you for both, and I'm in receipt of the report. Really appreciate the work. Yeah. Moving on to item number 9, items of receipt, I should say. I will tend to all of them collectively. I am in receipt of items 9.1 and 9.2 A, B, C, and D. And finally, I draw your attention to item 10, communications for action or receipt, and find attached a letter from the Special Education Advisory Council regarding the Vocational 2 program. I'm in receipt of that as well, and thanks to the Special Education Advisory Council for taking the time and providing their support for this particular direction of the Vocational 2 programming. I don't believe there is any further business, and that draws our meeting to conclusion, and we are now adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, and hopefully we'll see you soon.